Hey guys, before we get to the main part of the video where we're going to be talking about sort of an ultimate year 2000 machine I put together centered around the first generation of the Pentium 4 with socket 423, I have a couple fairly important announcements, or just announcements I want to make about the channel. So if you want to get straight to the video itself about the machine, I'll leave a little timestamp in the description if I remember, but these you should probably listen to these because these are some pretty cool announcements, sort of. So anyways, first of all, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but yeah, I think it was a month or two ago, I finally passed the 1,000 subscriber threshold, which is kind of amazing for what the content it is I put out. I mean, I know there's a lot of channels that put out pretty much the same stuff. I know old computers and electronics is a bit of a niche thing, and I know 1,000 these days on YouTube is nothing. There's channels that started after me that cover the same stuff, and they're already in the tens of thousands. So I mean, as far as that goes, it's 2 years to get to 1,000 on YouTube is pretty bad. It's not good. But I mean, for what I do, just shooting this stuff, no script, just shooting stuff, it's pretty good. I mean, I put like an hour into editing these videos. I don't put half the effort that some of these guys do. So even with that, it's amazing I got to 1,000. So thank you for that. Now, I am thinking about doing like a contest, a giveaway. I'm thinking about maybe when I get to 1,486, because God knows I'll probably never get to 80486. So I'm just going to do it at 1,486 maybe. I have a really good idea, a cool idea of something to give away, but I'm not quite sure how to go about this because I'm willing to eat the shipping in the US, but I know I got a lot of people from overseas that watch this channel, and I don't want to screw them over and exclude them, but I'm not sure if asking for shipping costs to another country is against YouTube's policy on giveaways or not. I'm not sure how that works. I haven't really looked into it, so I'm going to have to look into that. But I think I have a really cool thing to sort of give away as a thank you if I do the contest. So next thing that's really exciting, I got my first personal attack on the channel, which is really cool because I kind of expected it. I kind of expected that really early on. Like my first video, I was like, oh god, people are going to be like ripping me apart. But I think that's a new YouTube record. I told my buddies out there, like, wow, that's got to be a record. 2+ years before I got my first personal attack, and I believe it was even a little bit homophobic. And it's like, wow, it took them long enough. But yeah, that's really exciting. I've had some conversations with people on my channel before, but they've been all adult. You know, I try to treat people online the same I would in person, and I'm usually very diplomatic and respectful, but you know, if I don't like someone's videos, I just don't watch them and I go away. But I know some people feel that they need to be, you know, nasty. But that was really exciting to finally get my first personal attack. I'm sure there'll be more to come in the future, and I'm super excited. I can't wait to see some more of those personal attacks. So now, another big thing we got going is, since I hit 1,000 subscribers, I thought I'd step my game up a little bit. So I have finally upgraded the camera. So yeah, not a big upgrade. I am not willing to spend $800, $1,000 for this channel. This is just something I do for fun. I don't make money off it. So yeah, I am not willing to drop $1,000 on a camera. But I did decide to upgrade a little bit on the Black Friday sale. Now this is the Canon Vixia Hf R 800. This is entry level. This is not a professional camera, but this came pretty highly recommended. There's a lot of YouTubers that recommend this as sort of like a cheap budget camera to use. And I think this came out 2017. This 2017 model, so it should be an improvement over the camera I am using here, because this camera I'm using here is really old, and it is HD, but I complain about it all the time if you watch the channel. So I am excited doing at least a little bit of an upgrade here with this camera. Now, one thing to note is sometimes I shoot some of my parts of my videos way in advance. Like I'll get a CPU and then I'll shoot the video part of it and then I'll tuck it away, and then maybe a month or two later I'll get other parts and then I'll put it together and do more of the video. So with this video actually included and some of the future ones, you might be seeing quality differences between segments, and that's because some segments are going to be shot with this camera, and then from now on all my new shooting will be done with this camera. Okay, so with all that out of the way, let's go to the main part of the video. We're going to be talking about my Ultimate Year 2000 build and socket 423. Alright, so here's our machine right here. So what is the point of this machine? So what I wanted to do is, first of all, I wanted to check out the rumors of the early Pentium 4s. Now, Pentium 4 gets a lot of hate, and I really only experimented with much later Pentium 4s. But apparently the early Pentium 4s based on the Willamette were very slow, very bad. Now, this isn't uncommon in the history of CPUs. Now, usually it's kind of common to actually have the last generation, the last of the last generation be faster than the first of the next generation. So let me give you an example. Like the Pentium, the AMD 386s, the 40 megahertz DX chips, were superior to the early 486s. We saw this again with the 486s in the Pentium. The late 486s, let's say like the 133 megahertz AMD 486, 5x86, but all in it was a 486. It was superior to the early Pentiums, along with some of the other very late 486 chips. So this wasn't really uncommon, but for some reason the Willamette, the early socket 423 Pentium 4s, get a really, really bad rap. Probably because they were very expensive. Again, not uncommon when you get the first of the next gen of chips, but apparently it was just very inferior in performance to the Pentium 3 that preceded it. Now, the Pentium 4 was using a new kind of architecture called net burst. Pentium 3 was still working with the P6 architecture, I believe, and that was the same architecture used through the Pentium Pro and the Pentium 2 and the Pentium 3. But apparently it was superior. It gave superior performance in games and applications, and I just wanted to make a build to sort of test that. Now, eventually I think the Pentium 4 got sorted out. Intel went with net burst because you could achieve higher clock speeds with it, but like I said, these early Pentium 4s, clock for clock, the Pentium 3 is supposedly faster. Spoiler alert, it is. So we're just going to look at that, and we're going to see actually how much faster a Pentium 3 based system from around the same time period. We're going to go with contemporary machines, how much faster a Pentium 3 is. But when doing this, I wanted to have some fun. So I wanted to just build like an ultimate Pentium 4 socket 423. So I was treating this as if like it was some rich kid's Christmas present for Christmas of year 2000, I figured. So all these chips were available at least very late in December of the year 2000. Now the Pentium 4, the 1.4 and the 1.5 chip did come out in December of 2000. Now I don't know for sure if they probably weren't readily available, but they did exist, so we're just going to go with it. So we're going to start off just a quick look at the front. We went fairly simple here. We went with our 1.44 megabyte floppy drive. Of course, that's standard. This time in computers, it really wasn't used much, except for maybe if you were writing documents, saving documents. Games didn't come on these anymore. I also went with a DVD drive. This is from 1999, I believe. I believe the fastest DVD drives were probably like times 16 speeds. Pioneer made one times 16, but I think this is only at times 12 maybe. But yeah, I think CD-ROM drives were still in more common use, but DVD drives in computers weren't uncommon in that time period. Alright, so before we look at the video card and audio card and the computer in general, let's take a look at some of the major components. So first off, we're going to start with the board. Now this is a socket 423 board. Looks pretty much like any other board, except this one is a little bit odd. I figured if I'm going to put together a socket 423 board, may as well get an interesting board at least. Now this board is from a company, I believe it was QDI. I do not think that company is with us anymore, or it's changed its name, or it's been passed around so many times. Who knows? But this board, I believe it's called the Plantini or the Plantine. It's like Plainix, so it's the Plantinex, something like that. 4X motherboard. So as I said, this is socket 423, 400 megahertz front side bus. So this board can only take the sorry, I know you guys correct me all the time with pronunciation here, but I never can remember. Willamette or Willamette CPUs. So then those go up to 2 gigahertz, although I do believe they make some sort of upgrade sort of contraption so you can put Northwoods on a board like this. But officially this is only for the Willamette or Willamette core Pentium 4s, which were the original ones. Yeah, basically it looks just like most boards from the time. We've got a AGP x4 slot, we got some PCI. This guy here, I believe this is called a CNR slot. I don't know much about them, but I think they were an attempt to make sort of a standardized slot for networking cards. So I believe there are cards made for this slot, but they're all, I believe they're all like Ethernet cards, maybe even modems. There might be other kind of cards, but I'm not 100% sure. One of the first things that struck me about this board is the strange arrangement of RAM slots here. I've never seen a board quite like that, where they're sort of all over the place. Like, this is 1, and then we have 2 here, and then 3 and 4 are separated. And these are actually these aren't DIMMs, these are RIM slots, and I'll talk about that in a second when we look at RAM, because this Pentium 4 takes a very specific type of RAM that was kind of popular with the early Pentium 4s. We have ATA or our IDE controllers here. I believe these are ATA 100 floppy controller. Now another weird thing, it's not weird, this was again common with the Socket 423. Socket 423 was a little bit weird, not much different, but it was different from the later boards. It felt like they were still trying to figure this out. Like I said, Socket 423 was not around for a long time. And another one of the weird features, other than the RAM, is the power requirement. So you have sort of a standard, oops, I'm sorry, you can't see that. You have sort of a standard connection right here. And then next to that, we have this. This was an auxiliary power connector, and then of course we have the 4 right here that we see also in later boards. But yeah, for this to operate, you needed to plug in all of these to power it. But I believe Intel quickly learned that just the architecture of this board really wasn't designed well for upping the power with the Pentium 4, so I think they redesigned things with socket 478, and they got rid of this kind of awkward extra auxiliary connector. So just so you know, you are going to need a power supply with these auxiliary connectors, and as well as forgot what this is called exactly, but it's a 4-pin power connector. And I don't see those power supplies too often that come with the connection for this. Now Dell used a special proprietary PSU setup too that also used these on their motherboard, but I do not know if it's the same. So if you have a Dell power supply that have one of these aux connectors, I don't know if I'd recommend trying it, because I don't know if the pin out is the same, so you might destroy your board or your power supply, but I don't know if it's the same kind of pin out. So that's basically all with this. So now we're going to look at the CPU, and here we go. Now this is the slowest. I wanted to do this with the slowest of the Pentium 4. So this is the 1.3 gigahertz Willamette core Pentium 4. It's kind of weird looking because it's got this big, it's all for pins, but definitely different from the later ones. Here's a Prescott, and this is basically what the Prescott Pentium 4s and the Northwoods look like. So it's a lot bigger. It just feels like it has a lot of wasted space here, where it's just pins going to the CPU itself. So this actually came out. This wasn't, even though this is the slowest Pentium 4, this actually didn't come out first. I believe it was a 1.4 and the 1.5 came out in 2000, and then this one, the slower one, came out in early 2001, which is a little bit weird, but I guess this was maybe going for a budget Pentium 4, so it was still pretty expensive when it came out, but yeah, this was not the first one that came out. Alright, so the first thing I think we should look at is the RDRAM. Now, RDRAM was set to be the next big thing. This was set to replace SDRAM, and this came out This has been around for a while, but it really only entered the the personal computer market around the time of Socket 423. And like I said, they thought this was going to replace SDRAM. Now, DDR also started coming out around the same time, but for the initial Pentium 4s, Intel actually did a licensing thing, and they decided to go with RDRAM. Now, in theory, this was supposed to be faster than SDRAM, but it ended up actually sucking quite a bit. It really wasn't, at least in practical uses on a desktop, it really wasn't much faster than SDRAM. Sometimes it was actually slower or the same speed depending on the situation. It was also very expensive. I believe it was so expensive to the point that Intel had to subsidize it and actually include RAM sticks with the sale of some of its motherboards. You'll also notice these have a heat spreader. Now, unlike some RAM sticks where the heat spreader is just for show, these need the heat spreader. These things get really hot, so they definitely need the heat spreader because these things always give off a lot of heat. And that extra heat sometimes leads to defects happening over time. Anyways, now you can see here it does look a little bit different. The setup here, and here is a 64 megabyte, and here, or wait, this is a 256. Sorry, and then here's a 64. It's the same brand. I believe these are PC 800. Now in the machine we're going to be looking at. I have installed 4 sticks of 128 megabytes, and they are also PC 800. So yeah, that's our DRAM. Wasn't around very long. It was dropped pretty quickly in favor of DDR. So this wasn't around for very long at all, just like Socket 423. Now, I don't know if it will focus here, but this guy I just picked up recently. This is the 1.5 gigahertz Pentium 4 from the year 2000. Now this was truly from the year 2000, unlike that 1.3 gigahertz CPU, which was, I mean, it was basically 2000. It came out in like January 3rd or something. But yeah, this did come out technically in the year 2000, the end of it, I believe, and this is the fastest Pentium 4 of that initial bunch, and it's 1.5 gigahertz. And I think I have the 1.3 in there, and I'm gonna run all the benchmarks and tests on that just to see, how the slowest of the Pentium 4s perform. But then I'm gonna put this guy in, and then this is gonna be the CPU that I go with. And it will be a true, year 2000, the fastest Pentium 4 machine for the year 2000. The other thing is this heat sink is a little bit weird, just in the way that you would think that there's this kind of like this black guide thing for it to go into, and it has tabs. It probably just depends on the board and the heat sink you're using, but you would think that it would hook there, but no, it doesn't. This one does on the tabs directly on the socket, because it won't fit any other way. So okay, so we're going to start with our sound card. Now, nothing special here. I just kind of went with the de facto standard, and this is a Sound Blaster Live, and this was from this specific card is from 2000, but these were all around that era. So there's different versions. This is actually the Value Edition, but it's actually no different from the regular edition, except that instead of gold, these are color-coded, and I think it's lacking like an expanded I/O sort of extension. But other than that, the quality, compatibility-wise, it should be exactly the same as the standard edition. Now, I believe there was also, there was a Platinum that might have been a little bit better. I don't know. I actually think the only difference with the Platinum is it came with like a front little expansion thing. So there was also the Sound Blaster Live 5.1. But I'm just using speakers with this setup. So again, I'm just using a regular Sound Blaster Live. I really like these things, even though there's not really anything special about them. They do support EAX, which environmental something extensions. But a lot of games use them. So this supports EAX, I believe 1.0 and 2.0. So they're very, very compatible with games from the time. And like I said, a lot of games from that time period did use the EAX, so it's a really good all-around card. I also like these. I think they handle DOS games very well, even though I'm not going to be dealing with DOS games with this machine. Just keep in mind these do, at least in my experience, do fairly decent with older games and compatibility. So let's take a look at what graphics card I'll be using. Alright, so here we go. The graphics card choice was actually fairly easy because, well, it was very straightforward what the top dog for graphics were in the year 2000, and that was the GeForce 2 Ultra. So here is this bad boy. Now there's a couple in this series. There's a GeForce 2 GTX, there's a GeForce 2 Pro, I think there's even like a GeForce 2 Ti maybe, but the Ultra is the top dog of the GeForce 2. Yeah, these really blew away the competition at the time. This was easily better than the Radeon DDR, the Voodoo 5500. Yeah, this thing was just the top dog at the time. So this even beat out the GeForce 3, the early GeForce 3 in certain areas. But yeah, the thing with these, they can be a little expensive. They can be a little hard to find. I think the biggest problem I had was just finding one because they aren't rare. I hate using the word rare sometimes. So they aren't really rare on eBay, but a lot of times it's confusing because a lot of cards look just like them. I even think the GeForce 3, there's a version of GeForce 3 that looks just like this card. So they get confused all the time. So you have to be really kind of careful about listing. Sometimes people say GeForce 2 Ultra and it's just not a GeForce 2 Ultra. It's something else. I think even the Quadro version of this looked the same, and sometimes there's a way to, I think, modify the Quadro to make it an Ultra, and sometimes people will put that up and they'll just sell it as a true Ultra. Just be careful with listings when you're looking for a GeForce 2 Ultra, but yeah, for the year 2000, this was definitely the top dog. Now, as drivers matured later on, the other cards kind of caught up a little bit with performance-wise, but even then, I still think this might be your best all-around pick for speed and compatibility. And certainly for the year 2000, if you're using drivers from that year, this would definitely be the top dog. So yeah, GeForce 2 Ultra, very cool card. Alright, so here I have the board set up for testing now. I did decide to go with Windows 98, so I actually got more RDRAM. I ended up buying 4 sticks of 128 megabytes. So we have 512 megabytes of RDRAM here, which is our good amount, our perfect amount for Windows 98. So I found that this board is really picky with RAM. I had to take the RAM out and reinsert it to not get RAM errors. I had to do that a couple times till it finally just worked. Also, it seemed like, you know, I couldn't get it to work in, like, for instance, using the two 256 megabyte sticks to get 512 just wouldn't work no matter what configuration I put them in. It did work though if I used the two 256 and then 264 megabyte sticks, but that gave us, like, you know, 600 and some megabytes, and you really shouldn't go over 512 with Windows 98. So I just thought I'd make it easy and just got 4 matching sticks of 128 megabytes. Now, as you can see, it is hooked up here. You do need a power supply, like I said earlier, with all these connections and this auxiliary connections. They're not too much on eBay, although you got to watch out. The first one I got, I plugged it in and actually the power supply started smoking. So some of these aren't the best quality. So just keep an eye out, keep that in mind. And to search, usually I found putting in like P4, Pentium 4 PSU, or Pentium 4 power supply will usually come up better results to give you power supplies with these aux connectors rather than putting in like aux power supply or something like that. Now I think they do make little adapters that you could put on more modern power supplies that will give them an aux adapter cable here, but I didn't see many of those, and I can't attest to their reliability. So yeah. Okay, so here's the machine. It is all put together, and the one thing I want to talk about real quick is the hard drive we're using here, because I think I forgot to mention earlier. This is a Quantum Fireball AT, I believe. It's only a 40 gigabyte drive. There were larger sizes out at the time. I believe 80 gigabytes may have been the highest in the year 2000, maybe a little bit higher, but 40 gigabytes wasn't bad for 2000. Now this is indeed a ATA 100, so it's taking full advantage of the ATA 100 connection here. So that was pretty much the fastest for the year 2000, at least as far as IDEs go. There were faster SCSI drives, but I decided just to go with old ATA or IDE on this machine. Alright, so then what contemporary computer can we put this machine up against? So we are going to pit the Socket 423 Pentium 4 up against our good friend, the Dell Dimension 4100. Now this came out in 2001, so it's more or less the contemporary of our Pentium 4 machine. Now this has a Pentium 3 1 gigahertz in it, so that's 500 megahertz slower, but it is the supposedly much faster Pentium 3. Now this will be using the exact same sound card, the exact same video card. Of course it's a different motherboard, but again I'm not doing direct comparisons. I just want to see what a build, a consumer build difference would be, so they don't have to be exactly the same or anything like that. So these are using the exact same drivers for the video card, and I'm also using the same version of PowerStrip, and I'm just using PowerStrip to disable VSync on the video card. So let's run those benchmarks. Alright, so let's take a look at some numbers here, and this is our 1 gigahertz Pentium 3, the Dell Dimension 4100, versus the Willamette 1.5 gigahertz Pentium 4. Now keep in mind, same graphics card, same video drivers, same sound card. I know you're not supposed to run sound in benchmarks, but I'm going for the overall experience. So if the benchmark had sound enabled, I enabled sound. So these are, very comparable contemporary machines here. So let's see the difference. Okay, so first I just wanted to run a couple synthetic benchmarks. I ran 3D Mark 2000. The Pentium 3 smashed the Pentium 4. We have the Pentium 4 with almost 3,000 3D marks, and we have the Pentium 3 with like 5,000, almost 5,700. So yeah, big difference there in 3D marks. Little bit different story on 3D Mark 2001 SE. They're very close, although the Pentium 3 does still win by about 200 3D marks, give or take. I would also like to point out I did all of these tests at 1024 by 768 with 32-bit color. I thought that was a reasonable sort of high resolution for the year 2000. I didn't want to go too crazy, and I didn't want to run on everything like really low resolution, so I thought that was a good sort of resolution to run all these tests at. So yeah, here, first set of benchmarks do not really look good for the Pentium 4. So we're going to actually move on to games now, and games is where I like doing benchmarks in games a lot more than synthetic benchmarks. I think it gives you a better idea of the real world performance. Before we do move on though, one more thing. There is one more benchmark I did that I didn't actually put on the graph, and that was for PCP Bench version 2.10. Now the Pentium 3 did win out here too as well. The Pentium 3 scored just short of 120 frames per second, 119.7 to be exact, and the Pentium 4 scored 84.9 frames per second, so just short of 85 frames per second. So another benchmark where the Pentium 3 came out on top. Alright, so now let's move on. Let's look at some games. Now remember, I ran all these benchmarks several times to get a good average and a good reading, and these were all done at 1024 by 768 with 32-bit color. Alright, now let's start off with MDK2, contemporary-ish game to both of these systems. We got almost 100 frames per second on the Pentium 3, and almost a little more than half that on the Pentium 4 at 57.6 frames per second. Moving on to a couple older games. Now both systems run both of these games very acceptably, over 60 frames per second, but still we still do see an edge on the Pentium 3. We got GL Quake with almost 120 frames per second on the Pentium 3, and the Pentium 4 only pulling 84.1 frames per second. Now with Quake 2, we have 120 frames on the Pentium 3 and 70.5 or maybe 71 on the Pentium 4. Okay, so moving on to a couple more demanding benchmarks here. We have the benchmark for Comanche 4, which is probably the most demanding game benchmark I did here with these systems. And we actually got pretty even results within the margin of error. So we got 21 frames per second on the Pentium 4, and we got 21.7 on the Pentium 3. So the Pentium 3 is pulling ahead a teeny bit, but it's not even 1 frame. So it's a tie, basically. Serious Sam, we got the Pentium 3 pulling ahead here too by 42.4 frames, and the Pentium 4 at 34.7. So closer than the earlier games, but still the Pentium 3 we have pulling ahead. Now, the one exception on this whole graph was Expendable, Millennium Soldier, where we did have the Pentium 4 pull ahead, but not by much. Now, I'm not quite sure why this was. For our Pentium 3, we got 69.1 frames per second, and for our Pentium 4, we got 72.5. So it's only, what, 3 or 4 frame difference. So it's, you know, that's not much, but we did have the Pentium 4 pulling ahead very small amount. I'm not really sure why. But yeah, it did win it on one of the tests. But yeah, doing these benchmarks, it seems pretty conclusive between the synthetic benchmarks and the game benchmarks, and just playing a couple games on the Pentium 4, which I'll show some footage in a minute. It's just the Pentium 3 pretty definitively pulls ahead here. What, out of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tests, we had 4 of them where the Pentium 3 was the clear winner. We had one that was a tie, and the other one where the Pentium 4 barely pulled ahead. So yeah, it doesn't look good for that Pentium 4. Alright, so I always like to get footage of my computer's posting. So here's the post screen for the 1.5 gigahertz Willamette. Yeah, in the corner there, the right-hand corner, there's a little image there, the gold medal. Now, usually that's where I see like the Energy Star symbol, but I don't know. QDI really thought a lot of their motherboard. They put in their own little image there, their little gold medal for QDI, which it's interesting. It's nice to see that. But like I said, usually there's like an Energy Star symbol there or something. But yeah, little gold medal. Now, as for the color, you may have noticed the color's off. There's kind of a blue hue to it. That's not my hardware, the video card, or anything like that. It's just I realized my VGA cable was a little bit loose, and shortly after capturing this, I just secured the connection, and that cleared right up. Alright, and here's just CPU Z running, giving us all the little information. We've got our Willamette Pentium 4 running at 1.5 gigahertz. These only have 256K of L2 cache, just like the Pentium 3. Later on they bumped that up. There's our motherboard, the Legend QDI motherboard, and then just a quick look at our RDRAM memory. So there's that. Alright, so next, just got a real quick thing. This is from Powerbench, and this is that GeForce 2 Ultra, just to confirm. I also have the box checked for VSync turned off, and there's that. So now we're gonna just look at a couple games really quick. Alright, so here we have Halo running at 1024 by 768. And all the settings on high. And as you can see, I also have fraps going in the corner so we can see our frame rate, and it's not good. Now, I didn't run this game on the Pentium 3 to compare. I just wanted to run a couple games on this machine to see how it worked. And yeah, Halo at this frame rate is pretty much unplayable. So yeah. Okay, so here's the game running at 800 by 600 resolution. Particle effects are turned off, decals are turned off, and textures are set to low. It is far more playable, but really ugly. So it would have been possible to play this game at a fairly acceptable frame rate on this machine, but it's just it's so ugly at this setting, and it still doesn't even run that great. So yeah, not very good. I'll let this run for a second here. There's no sound because I am still having weird sound issues, and when it did record sound, it drops and goes and drops, so it's just going to be silent. So I'm just going to run this for a second, and then we're going to look at one more game on this machine real quick. Alright, and our second and last game I just wanted to look at real quick. This is Grand Theft Auto 3, and it is running at 1360 by 768 with 32-bit color, and that's a little bit strange resolution because that's the resolution I accidentally picked. So, yeah, there's a weird, like, ghosting going on here. It did that in the game, too, so that's not, like, an effect of the video capture. And, it actually ran kind of okay. I mean, it was playable. It was not the best experience. So again, I'm just going to let this run for a second here so you guys can get a feel of how this game ran on the system. I'll slap on some sort of appropriate music as well so we don't have complete silence. So what are my final thoughts on this year 2000 build? Well, as for the parts, again, I think the graphics card, the GeForce 2, is a phenomenal card. But for the core parts we were testing, it's just, if you bought an early Pentium 4 adopter, I'm sorry. I feel bad. They were just phenomenally expensive, and you were getting sometimes significantly worse performance. But that's the thing with all early chips. For a new generation, they're always really expensive, and sometimes they just don't give the performance. So that's why I'm never usually like an early adapter with certain CPU generations. But actually, I was very surprised at how poorly the Pentium 4 actually performed. I actually thought it would give up or give a better fight with the Pentium 3, but it was just not good. The RDRAM doesn't help. It's expensive. It's hot. It just doesn't really give any benefit. Sometimes it's even a disadvantage. It's just, there was just no reason to go to have a early Pentium 4. There wasn't a reason then. There's not really a reason now as a retro gamer. You're just, even though, well, it's not even cost. I mean, these socket 423 boards, the chips themselves are fairly inexpensive, but socket 423 boards are just, they're kind of like collector's items now. So you're going to be paying a premium. You're better off just buying a Pentium 3 board. It's going to be faster, and it might even be cheaper, even though it's an older. So yeah, if you're making a retro machine around this period, go with AMD, go with an Athlon or an Athlon XP, go with a Pentium 3, go with a later Pentium 4, but do not go with the Willamettes unless you're just doing it as a fun project. Now, I do think the Pentium 4s did become competitive, but I don't think that was until the Northwood revisions, and probably like 2.5 gigahertz or 2 gigahertz plus, and then especially when hyper-threading came about, I think they became fine CPUs then. Unfortunately, the Willamettes, I think, gave the whole line a bad reputation, which is unfortunate, because I rather do like the later CPUs in the Pentium 4 line, but yeah, avoid the Willamettes. They're just... unless you're building like a project, a fun project, they're a dog of a chip. I actually did the benchmarks over, and I was like double checking drivers, and I was double checking everything, and because the results were just worse than I thought, but yeah, not good. So I think later on I would eventually like to do a video where I'd like to put a 2 gigahertz Willamette in here, and see how that fares, extra 500 gigahertz. See if that actually helps, how much it helps. Unfortunately, the 2 gigahertz chips are a little bit expensive, but I might do that eventually. I'd also like to check out some of the early Northwoods, maybe see where that turning point actually is. So yeah, and we're not even talking about the 1.4 gigahertz Pentium 3, the Tualatin CPUs that would just, I mean, if this 1 gigahertz chip, the 1 gigahertz chip in the Dell was able to blow this thing away, I'd hate to see what the 1.4 gigahertz Pentium 3 Tualatin would do to these poor Willamette Core Pentium 4s. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something new. If you like this kind of stuff, please subscribe. I am trying to up the quality of these videos a little bit. Not really willing to throw in all the wacky effects yet, and but maybe the next step is buying some video, doing a video editing suite other than MS, the free MS movies or whatever it's called. So I don't know what's next. Scripted videos, guest appearances. Who knows? Probably not. But I appreciate you guys for watching. I enjoy making these. I hope you guys enjoy watching them. So again, thanks again. I'll see you in the next video.